Here we are back at it again with our latest podcast with Jackie Gutierrez. Jackie is the main editor for Eater Nashville and has a wealth of extensive knowledge about writing about food from her hometown in Miami. This was a really good podcast. She has great insight on what it's like being a food writer in this day and age. Jackie Gutierrez from Eater.
Hi there.
Thanks for sitting down with us and talking.
This is a super comfy couch, by the way.
It's dangerous, so don't get too comfortable.
So thank you.
Yeah, this is a good day off couch. I want to take a nap. And next thing you know, it's like 7 o'clock at night. Typical format of the podcast. You know, how did you get started in food? You're a journalist. Did you always want to be a journalist? What kind of journalism did you want to start doing, and how did you wind up being the editor of Eater?
All right, great question. So TLDR, because this could go way long. I've always loved writing since I was a little girl. It's been a passion of mine. And as a kid, I was always winning those English awards in school, like best English student. So I knew there was something there. But I was convinced by people as I was going through schooling that writers don't make money. So forget that. So I went into business and business school, and that's what I did. And I kind of cycled through the more creative aspects of that. Went through public relations, so I kind of understand the PR side of things. I became a graphic designer for a while, so I kind of understand I understand the photography and artistry behind things. And I kind of fell upon writing again, funny enough, through Yelp. Mm-hmm. And this was when Yelp very first started. I remember I was standing in front of a club in Miami with some friends, and we were just talking and shooting the shit. And a friend of mine was like, hey, so I'm this Yelp elite, and we get all this free drink and food at these amazing parties, and all I heard was free drink and food. Yeah. And at the time I was super broke, and I'm like, free drink and food, how do I get this? Well, you have to write all these reviews on Yelp, and then they invite you to become an elite. You get invited to all this stuff. And I'm like, I like to eat, and I love food, and I like to write. I can totally do that.
Enter in South Park episode.
So I went onto Yelp, and first couple of reviews were just kind of doing things on Miami restaurants and just very by the book kind of reviews. And then my knack for being creative and tapping into my writer side kicked in. And I started to have a lot of fun with the reviews. And I started treating the reviews like creative writing exercises. So a lot of time they were barely even about the restaurant, but just some bullshit that I wanted to talk about on Yelp. And it caught people's attention. And there was a rating system on Yelp where people would fuck you, favorite, or, I forget what it stood for, but it was FUCK. So I was getting a lot of fucks on Yelp. And that led to private messages from people saying, hey, do you do this professionally? We really love your reviews. Would you consider writing for us? And that's how the freelance machine started up.
Magazines or papers or something? Or?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then that turned into my big permanent gig with a publication called Urban Daddy.
What were you doing while you were being a elite Yelper?
You have another
job? Or?
I was a graphic designer.
You're a graphic designer.
I was a
Amazing.
graphic designer.
Okay.
And so when the freelance picked up, I stopped graphic design and I started working in the journalism field. And my first big gig was Urban Daddy. I was the Miami editor for that for 5 years. And that was writing about the hottest new restaurants, bars, clubs in Miami every single day. It was a new publication every day. And it was
every day you put an article out.
Yes, every day.
That's gotta be exhausting. Well, how do you forecast that?
It was, you try, you have to keep in touch with public relations professionals, your connections in the city. You have to know business owners, restaurateurs, bar managers. You keep in contact with them and hey, we heard so and so is opening in a month. So you track that on your calendar. Okay, I need to keep in touch with this and see if I can line up a photo shoot, interviews and walkthroughs a month from now. But the editorial calendar is key. And so you try the best that you can to forecast who's opening when and when you can publish. And a lot of it is serendipitous. As you know, opening a restaurant, permits and all kinds of things happen and things get pushed by 2 weeks and there goes your calendar. And so everybody gets screwed by the permitting process, not just you guys, the journalists get screwed, everybody gets screwed. It sucks for everybody. So that's really how the whole writing career took off. And I did that for Urban Daddy for a while. And I actually wrote for Eater Miami at the time for a little bit too. And it evolved from there, Time Out and Lonely Planet. And so that's how I landed my writing gigs in food.
So did you ever miss a deadline? You had to put out a story about a restaurant every day, like what happens if you don't have anything to write about?
That happened a lot.
Yeah.
And also at the time, there was a real like strong competition between Urban Daddy and Thrillist.
Sure. Yeah.
And if they ever like bested us, I couldn't run the article. So if we wrote about the same restaurant and they came out with it first, if I had it running later that afternoon, I'd have to kill the story. I couldn't run it if Thrillist ran it. And that was always so like defeating for me. Like, cause you put a lot of work into it, like that whole calendar, the writing, the editing, the photography, everything that goes with it. And you just have to trash it and flush it.
What year was this about?
This was 2012.
Yes. This is like the heyday of like, this is pre-influencer.
Yes.
This is when like journalists ran the show.
Yes.
Like even in Chicago, there were like so many articles being written, so many publications, so many like bloggers that had like a lot of cred because they wrote like good blogs. And they were always worried about somebody getting their story. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I gotta put this out now. Like, no, you can't. You have to wait a week. I can't. They're on to me.
Yeah. Like, Instagram wasn't really a thing. Like
Instagram was just pictures.
It was really like, you know, the very purest form of Instagram. Like I'm just taking pictures of me and my friends out and it looks like garbage.
And you can put a filter to make it look like 1977.
Exactly. You know? That was like the best thing of life.
Right.
But it's not what it is
just
today.
A total side note. It's amazing what Instagram turned into.
It really is.
You know, I don't know anything. There's a couple things that I know nothing about, like city planning and real estate. How people can look at like this is gonna like Wedgwood Houston's a great example. Like somebody took me to Wedgwood Houston like early 2020, summer 2020, and like this is gonna be the premier neighborhood. And it was rubble. Like the Soho House was rubble, and I was just looking around like, what are you talking about, man? And to see where it is now, and like another thing is like how Instagram went from a platform to like put pictures that look like 1977.
Yes.
You know, your McDonald's birthday from the 70s to this place that's breaking news, breaking stories about the wars happening or this or that. I mean, it's
a huge driver for purchases and advertising.
Yeah.
I mean,
ads.
So much of that. That's not what it was back in 2012 at all. So you're right. It was a lot of like bloggers and journalists and a lot of these publications that were very like niche in the industry.
It was like the Wild West of writing. I think.
It was.
Would you say so too? Yeah.
It was fun and it was a blast, but it was really stressful because again, if somebody bested you, like nobody wants to read your story after they've read it here. Like you're like too late to the game, so that's done.
But did you think in Miami there was a lot of restaurants opening around that time in Chicago, but there was like space between them. Like it seemed like everybody got their turn to like have an article or two articles written about their restaurant. And now it's just like there's so many bars. We just talked about how many bars are opening up. Like I can't even keep track of what's going on in Nashville. Like how do you manage all of that with what you do? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves and I want to get back to like Miami, but
yes, no, there's so much that's happening in Nashville and it's just picked up steam. I feel even ever since like the pandemic, it's
out of control. Yeah.
It is out of control. It's like every other day or every day there's something new popping up. And how you handle it, it's tough. And that's why I think I hate like relying on this so much, but like roundups, it's hard to give just like one restaurant like the limelight all the time. Sometimes you just have to put them all like on one big article. Like here's the new openings for like the week, and you have like 10 people in the article, you know, and so you kind of kill 10 birds with one article.
Yeah.
And I hate to do that because I'd love to do a deep dive on all of these, and they all deserve like limelight, but time just doesn't afford it.
But is there any possible way that you could like do long lead stories of like spotlights on stuff, you know, where like maybe you do 3 or 4 spotlights a year?
And that's what I do, try to do that at least a couple times a month. I'll do a deep dive on a restaurant. So recently we did that with Bad Idea. That was my spotlight restaurant. I focused on that. There's a lot of cool stuff happening there. Really exciting, something new they're bringing to the table with a loud cuisine and the amazing wine program. So we did do a deep dive on that one. So I try a couple times a month to really focus in on a restaurant and give it its time to light. And if I can't, I try to come back to them in some way, like, well, let's do like an inside the dishes. Why don't we like explore some of your signature dishes, the thought behind it? So it's a different angle, right? I'm still covering you. You're not like newly opened anymore, but I'm coming at it from another way and still trying to give you some time in the light.
But it's just you though. Like you can't do the hot list. You can't do the roundups. You can't do the I mean, that seems like a lot of work.
It is me by myself,
Yeah.
me, myself, and I. I have a couple freelancers that work with me, but they, help me with a couple articles a month. But by and large, it's me. And by the way, it is a part-time job, which is what most people don't understand about Eater Nashville. It is not a full-time job. So I have a full-time job. It's not Eater Nashville. That is my part-time job.
I want to think like Eater is like, what is that movie? Like All the King's Men? What's that movie where the journalists, where they're going over the Nixon Watergate,
Yeah.
Where there's like a newsroom and there's all these people working and there's like 10 people working on one story. Like that's how I want to romanticize what goes on at Eater. And it's definitely not that. It's you behind a laptop.
Oh, no, it's not that sexy. I'm telling you, not that
Yeah.
sexy. I wish it was like Washington Post or something. Like that.
Washington Post.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
Wish it was like the WAPO newsroom.
Uh-huh.
But no, it's not that sexy. Now, that's not to say like, depending on the city. So some cities have more like coverage, obviously like New York, LA, they will have like a team there that works. But a lot of the other cities, it's just a one-man show.
Second or third
a
cities,
one-person show, I should say, yes.
Let's get back to Miami. So you're working at Eater Miami.
So yeah, Urban Daddy, but I was
Urban Daddy, right.
freelancing
Okay.
for Eater Miami as well. And I was there I covered the scene for a long time, and then got the bug to look at other places and other cities. And we came to Nashville for the solar eclipse. And
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
2017. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Came for the solar eclipse, and you visit cities and you like them, and there are certain aspects that you kind of like fall in love with. But sometimes, I don't know about you, but at the end of the trip, like I'll ask my husband, like, okay, we really like this city, but would we live here? Like, would you live in the city?
It's easy to vacation somewhere and be
Yes.
like, this is amazing.
Right,
because
but-
you're staying in a hotel, you're at the beach, there's no stress.
Right. But
You don't have
could
to deal
you
with
like
traffic.
actually live it?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, I would say love the city, but no. Miami is it for me. Like Miami is it. Nashville was the only time, obviously that's why I'm here now. I was, you know what? I could live in Nashville. I could do it. And and this will like relate to, I think, what we're going to be talking about. I got this sense in Nashville that big things were happening. Like there was an evolution that was happening in Nashville. And I always felt so fortunate and lucky to watch Miami evolve. Miami being this like touristy beach town with not much of a food scene when I was like, a teenager and younger. It really didn't have much of a food scene.
Right.
And it started to evolve in the 90s as like Versace came in and like all of that influence, the model industry, the film industry really changed Miami and got a lot of people's attention. And I got to watch the food scene evolve and become like what it is today. And it's amazing. I mean, you can go all different kinds of cuisine from high to low. I mean, it doesn't matter. Miami's got a wild food scene and I love it, but I got to watch it. And when I got to Nashville, I'm like, that's starting to happen here. I'm watching like a change and an evolution. Like, yes, they're known for the Southern cuisine and of course, the hot chicken, which is somewhat recent on the radar. But there's something bubbling up here and it's catching people's attention, and how exciting it would be to like watch another city evolve and come into
And
itself.
be part of it. And be part of the community. Yeah.
Yes. And my husband was on board and we moved within the year, and here we are. And at the time they had the editor position for Eater Nashville open. And I remember my husband saying, why don't you throw your hat into the ring? I'm like, no, time's not right. Like, I don't know Nashville yet. Like, we just moved here. I know how to write about food and I understand food, but I don't know the city yet. So it's not like the time. And it ended up going to Delia Joe, who is fantastic, and I love her. And we ended up becoming friends, and I started to freelance under her. And that was a great way to expose me to Nashville and really get to understand what it was, what it currently was, and what it could be. Watching, like, getting to learn who all the players were, who was what, was really like a good couple years. And then, Delia, when she eventually left, the position remained open for a while. And when they finally put it up for a job search, my husband was like, now? Like, I think now.
Yeah, right
so
on.
here I am.
That's great.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think were the driving factors that you're like, I want to move here? Was there anything where like, wow, this is really cool? Besides you being involved or seeing a niche in the food scene and feel that you could be part of that and feel like you want to watch it grow. Like, what are the other factors that made you want to leave Miami and come to a town without a beach?
This is going to be, I'm part of the problem. So when I say this, I realize that I'm part of the problem, but I really loved the slower pace of life. I loved that it was still it had a big city feel, but not the annoyances of a big city, the huge traffic problems, the overcrowding in a lot of the neighborhoods. Miami's got way too many people, and it's just easy to spend your whole day in traffic, and it's frustrating. People are angry about it, and I didn't get that sense here. There was still like that buzz of a big city, but not the annoying parts of it. And I realized like it's changing. Those annoying parts are starting to come, and I'm part of that problem because I moved here from one of those big cities. So I am, self-aware in that way. But I think that's one of the things that attracted me. Like this still feels like it's buzzing, and there's fun to be had here, and it's growing, and it's big city, but not too big city.
I always thought like you get stuck in traffic, and it's like 12 minutes. As opposed to LA, it's like 4 hours.
Exactly.
Like you don't know. People complain in Nashville traffic. You don't know traffic, man.
That's exactly what I said. I mean, it's changing now. I mean, there's some traffic patterns. I'm like, whoa, like this was not like what it was when we first moved here. But I remember we were watching the news one morning when we first moved here, and they were like, the newscaster was like, hey, watch out today. Like the traffic is really backed up, and they pan like to the highway, and it's like free flowing. I'm like,
right.
This is the dream.
You're moving.
They thinking that this is traffic. It's moving. So that's not so much the case anymore. But I remember thinking, wow, so good.
I always said that when I first moved here, and I got here in 2016, and it's completely changed like so much to now. But I thought when I first got here from 2016 to 2019, I always said like Nashville's kind of like this weird food scene happening where you have a handful of extraordinary chefs doing amazing things where you could pluck them out and put them in any major city and they would still rise to the top somehow. And then underneath that, you have the meat and threes, the Nolensville taquerias, the hot chicken, the street food kind of thing. But there wasn't much in between that. Like there was no French bistro. There's no great Spanish tapas. There's no Chinese food. There's some really great ethnic food when you get into down Charlotte with like the Vietnamese little pockets and stuff. I think that's definitely changed in the last post-pandemic, I think, is from what I've noticed. You have people really doing niche things like Rooney Ramen, I think, is just like a great example of that. He's like, well, I'm just going to make ramen. Even though there's a ton of ramen places here, we're going to like do it my way. There's sushi places opening up. There's, Colby at Bad Ideas. Sean's doing his things. There's these, the amazing pop-ups that just happen around the city. If you really keep an eye on it, you could get exposed to like up-and-coming chefs doing things. Like, what is the sense that you have of like where the restaurant industry is when you got here, and like how have you seen it grow, and how have you contributed to that?
So when I first got here, and it was that sense of what drew me to Nashville was that people were paying attention. And when people start to pay attention, they're drawn to the city. They bring their cultures, they bring their influences, they bring their experiences. And I saw that was starting to happen. It hadn't quite taken root yet, but it was happening. And, the pandemic in many ways, frustrated a lot of that and kind of foiled all of that. But also people were getting really creative during the pandemic. And that, I think, also expanded what was going on in the food scene here. I mean, you had people that were like in the music industry, all of a sudden were like making cinnamon rolls like out of their house.
Ornate bread.
Oh, yes,
I mean,
exactly.
What are you doing is the best sourdough I've ever
Yes,
tasted.
exactly. Yeah. And so in a weird way, it kind of like forced people to be creative and really kind of leveled up the food scene. And a lot of these people ended up not even going back to the music industry and what they came from. They stayed in the food biz, which I think is amazing. And throughout the pandemic, the influx of people like moving here from the bigger cities, they have different palates, they have different expectations, and that opens up a market.
The demand caught up with. So I think that we just hit it on the head. When I got here, I feel like I was a couple of years early for what I like a city to have. you know.
Yes.
And I got it. I was like, there wasn't even a grocery store in East Nashville besides the Murder Kroger that's
Murder
up the road. And I was just like, geez.
The infamous Murder
You know, I'd have
Kroger.
to drive all the way across town to go to Whole Foods.
Yes.
That was in Green Hills, which is like, you know, half an hour, 25 minutes. And the city finally got up to the demand. I think the demand of the influx of people asking or looking for the things that they like, the restaurants, the accessibility to great coffee. Yeah, I can always measure a city by the coffee shops. That's how I measure cities. So I think like you were right. I think the demand of those people helped elevate it in a way. Yeah.
And really, it was almost like a powder keg. It exploded.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a very slow, gradual thing. The pandemic really forced the issue, and it's exploded. There's so much happening now, and that's because I think a big reason, all the people that have come here, they want these things, and they're sometimes doing it themselves. Like, well, if I'm not finding here, I'm going to do it myself.
Right.
And I think that is really cool and exciting. And the next evolution of that, which I've started to see, is, okay, these people have come in and they're bringing like their cultures and what they know from these big cities and from their backgrounds. And they're putting out this food from what they know. But I've started to see how they are mixing it with the South and what's happening here, and how that's kind of evolving and they're intermeshing. So the best example, and I kind of love to see this, Julio Hernandez of Maíz de la Vida. I love what he does. He put together a dinner and he had like a dish. It was shrimp and grits, traditional Southern dish. But the corn that he used for the grits was something that he had sourced from a small like family setup in Mexico. He like knew them personally. He's used that corn in his masa for his tortillas, and he's like bringing a piece of his culture and his heritage into this very traditional Southern dish. And these like locals are eating that. They're eating a piece of his culture and his food, but told through their lens.
Right.
And I find that so interesting, and
endearing.
it warms my heart. I love that. And I've started to see touches of that throughout the city. Like, okay, the Southern cuisine was here. Now you have these people coming in and bringing their own like style of things. Well, now the two are starting to intersect. And that's where the fun happens. So I think I'd like to see more of that happen. And I am seeing it, but I think that's where things are kind of going, and it's going to be its own thing. I think it's going to be exciting.
Well, I mean, chefs also push the farmers to grow different stuff.
Yes.
I'm always talking to Lauren. She's like, what can we do for next year? I was like, I don't know. Let's make some habanero peppers or this or that. Or, you know, what do you got? I'll take everything that you're doing. And it's really great, a symbiotic relationship with some of these farmers, you know. With the influx that's happening with the things that you're seeing, how do you feel about the outside huge restaurant groups coming in or chains coming in and opening these larger restaurants in some of these high priced neighborhoods? How do you think that's going to change the landscape of our little small food scene right now?
That's the price of success, right?
Yeah.
They see a good thing happening here and they want to capitalize on it. And it's a tale told throughout a lot of major cities. But I feel that a lot of other bigger cities have learned how to balance it. Because certainly you see a lot of these big restaurant groups and major names in bigger cities, but yet they retain their DNA, their food DNA. So it's possible. But, you know, I love Vegas. We were talking about Vegas earlier. Vegas is great. It is what it is, but it is a carnival of food and it's a show, right? And when you think about Vegas, there is no like cuisine or food that is like indigenous to Vegas necessarily. There's not something that pops up in my head that's like, oh, Vegas, well, they're known for like this XYZ dish.
Right.
It just doesn't. Why? Because it's all these like big restaurant groups and names. And so that's fine because that's what Vegas is. It just doesn't have its own DNA. Nashville does have that. It has a food DNA. It has something that makes it uniquely Nashville. And my hope is that it retains that as the circus comes into town, which it is. Look, and I have fun at a lot of these, big restaurants. They provide something to the scene, and certainly the tourists love them. The people that come to visit want the show. They want the big, explosion. They want that. So there's a place for it. I think there's a place for all of it. It's, can we balance it? Can we retain like this food DNA that we have here in Nashville, that our identity? Can we keep it while the circus is like all around us? I don't know. I think we'll see.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I hope the loud voices don't drown out the smaller
Right.
ones.
You had mentioned the tourists don't go to East Nashville.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
So it's interesting. This is something that I've heard from a couple of chefs and restaurant owners in different neighborhoods that are not Broadway downtown. They feel like the tourists don't come to them unless like they are into food, like they are in the food
Seeking
scene.
it out.
And
They're here. Yeah,
yes,
right.
they heard about, they read about this, and they went to go try it. It's like a pilgrimage for them. But they made like a special stop for it. Otherwise, they just don't get out to these neighborhoods, and they're like, we're doing something good out here. Like Nashville is so much more than just Broadway and Nashville.
It's a shame. It's a shame that Nashville's defined by that 10-block radius.
And to tourists, it is.
Yeah.
Like you have to do like Broadway, and even when you have people come visit from out of town,
Yeah,
it's like
totally.
you have to make the
All right,
Broadway.
I'll give you 45 minutes.
Yes,
we're gonna
exactly.
go to Robert's Western World. I'm
And
not
it's-
going to Kid Rock's. Like this, we're going to. You want to go downtown? We're going to where I want to go. 45 minutes, and I'm out.
We're out.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So okay, check it off your box.
Yeah,
we
right.
did it. We're
Right,
done.
right,
Let's
right.
get out of here. But they're right. Like the tourists don't get out there, and I don't know if it's a mix of just the type of people that are coming to Nashville, like what they're looking for, like they're seeking like the debaucherous, like I'm gonna go bar hopping, like and see the people throwing up and vomiting and all this kind of fun stuff on Broadway.
There's a market for that, and there's what people want to come and see.
Is that like the bulk of the tourists? Are they like
It's a good
driving that?
question.
Like
I don't
that's
know.
what
Yeah.
they want, or is there something in the reverse in that they're being pushed this image of Nashville, and they're not really, the narrative isn't there for the stories being told in the outlying neighborhoods, like what's happening in Germantown or East Nashville. That narrative isn't as interesting, or there's maybe not enough money in that. I'm not sure, but that narrative isn't being shared, I think, with tourists, and so it's just not on their radar.
I don't know if the narrative is the ink is still wet, maybe. I mean, just from 2016 to now, I've seen it change so much that you have
True.
to keep rewriting that narrative. And I think with what's happening in Wedgwood, Houston, and I'm biased because I have a restaurant there, but also the Dickerson corridor, what the plan for that, the Bordeaux area above where the Optimus is in
Yes.
Germantown, like I saw the plans for that. I think that those plans in those neighborhoods are going to attract a more sophisticated tourist that is going to be looking to come to Nashville besides Broadway. And I think the direct flight from London like really opened our eyes when the guests would start coming into Catbird saying, I flew in and I've always wanted to eat at Catbird. Or we'd have Japanese tourists come in that are, on a pilgrimage to drive from LA across country, and they wanted to stop in Nashville for country music. And those people weren't going to Broadway. They were seeking out other things. So I think that Wedgwood, Houston, Germantown, Dickerson, I don't know what that neighborhood is called. They're going to call it something. I don't know what does it have a name yet or no?
Not that I've just always referred to it as Dickerson.
As Dickerson, yeah. I really think like that's going to be where sophisticated tourists want to come and dine and go to bars that aren't Broadway. I think it's going to be a great break from getting off of the strip,
The strip, yeah, our strip,
yeah, and going to a place like Never Never, or going to
Right.
Bastion, where it's still kind of like a divey, but it's more sophisticated, or going to a Dozens Bakery for breakfast instead of waiting in line at Biscuit Love, which Biscuit Love is great, but there's always a line of 1,000 fucking people there. Pancake Pantry, those are the places that the tourists, whatever list that it is, that they're getting or they're looking at or they're reading the headlines, and that's where they're going. The question is, do you have a big enough voice to tip the scale to start drawing some of those sophisticated tourists, or even, the late 20-year-olds that come here for the bachelorettes, to get them to go somewhere else,
So that has been one of the biggest things that I want to do at Eater. First of all, was just catch it up, because it's been, kind of neglected-ish for a while. It didn't have like a permanent editor, and through no fault of, anybody's own, it was just trying to keep it alive while they were finding somebody to fill the editor role. So not really like anybody's fault specifically there. But so my job mostly has been the past couple of months cleaning it up a bit and just updating things that had been done because they expired long ago. But when I'm kind of done with the cleanup phase, what I want to do is really start shining a light on a lot of the stories that aren't being told. Listen, I do rely on public relations and PR. I could not do my job, without them. They are like crucial and critical. Like, they're super important.
Well, they keep you informed.
They absolutely.
Whether you want to be informed of what they're selling or not, they keep you informed.
Right. And I love them. There's some great people to work with in that industry. But honestly, I want to also tell the stories of people that aren't being pushed by the PR machine. And I think that is also going to attract tourists because that tells a deeper story. I think, what is happening in there, like who's like the creative minds that are doing something really cool that don't have the money to throw at a PR company or a marketing firm. And they're just doing something really cool and having fun and doing it really well, but nobody's talking about them unless you live within a radius there or your friend told you about it. That's the story I want to tell. I want to shine a light on that. And I hope that by doing that, it makes Nashville a little more interesting and less of the carnival and the show. Yeah. Because the carnival and the show can afford the PR machine, and that's a story that gets told, and that is the narrative. But it's not the only story. And so I want to tell the other story.
Right.
So that is one of my goals with Eater Nashville.
Does Broadway need a publicist? Oh. I mean, seriously, is anyone having a hard time finding Broadway? I didn't know this was here. Wow.
Surprise. No, I'm not getting press releases on Kid Rock.
Kid Rock put a new French fry dish on the menu. You gotta check it out. We added spicy ketchup to it.
No, but I do get a ton of stuff on the Broadway,
It's
downtown.
Amazing to me the places that close and reopen. I mean, you really nailed it of saying it's Vegas. If you go to Vegas and go back for 2-3 years, that hotel you stayed at, it's not even there anymore.
It's not. It's a new
it's
show.
It's a parking lot, right. And I feel Broadway is the same way. These there's a Margaritaville hotel. Does the world need a margarita? There's a gigantic 20-foot flip-flop in the lobby. Does the world need that?
Jimmy Buffett is needed everywhere.
Yeah.
But I actually stayed in that Margaritaville.
I saw your post. It looks pretty cool.
I actually did stay there. It's funny. They have a recording studio there and everything. They broadcast from that Margaritaville. Exactly. It's just, it's the show, right? It's another show. It's entertain me. I'm here for the bread and the circus, right? It's Margaritaville. It's another theme park. It's another amusement.
Huh. So yes, you're saying yes, the world needs Margaritaville.
I like Margaritaville. But Nashville, what story is it telling in Nashville? Margaritaville in Nashville?
Right. Right. Where do you think the world is with food journalism? And then we'll distill that down a little bit to where Nashville is.
We kind of touched upon this earlier about 2012 and what was kind of happening then. It was the Wild Wild West, and it's much different now. I remember at the time it was very much bloggers and journalists, and again the competition of who's going to cover what first. That has all been turned on its head. Now with what's happening on TikTok and Instagram, everybody is an influencer or a journalist, and it's become very competitive in that way. And so food journalists have to now ask themselves, what are we bringing to the table that's different than your garden variety influencer on TikTok that's shooting a video in a restaurant, here's the food that you're going to eat. What are we doing differently here? And what are we providing? What are we going to give to people that they just can't get on an app? And I think that's a question we're still grappling with. What are we doing differently? And how are we doing it differently? And I think a lot of it, the big thing, and I know we'll get into this a little bit more, but the big thing is it still remains purely editorial, right? Nobody is paying Eater to cover a restaurant and be put on a list. And if there is, it's very clearly marked this is a sponsored or an advertorial. Right,
yeah, correct. Yes.
Right. So-and-so bought a package and we're doing an advertorial. It's very clearly marked. But what we put out there, and we put disclaimers this is purely editorial. We're not being paid off by anybody. We're not being sponsored by anybody. This is truly us experiencing the restaurant and letting this is what's happening here. It's not pay for play. And I think that's something that does set us apart from your typical influencer. They're being paid, in a lot of ways for their content, and that's how they make money, and that's fine. The ethical ones will disclose that that's being sponsored and they're being paid and it's an ad, but a lot of times they don't, and that's dicey, right? So, what you as an audience or as a consumer, how do you discern then, like, well, this is what's being fed to me because genuinely somebody enjoyed this place and had a good experience, I'm seeing it, or this is like another like PR machine funding this content
Correct.
and only showing me what they want me to hear. So I think that that's what we're grappling with now, and it's tricky. It's a tricky time, and it's frustrating in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel we haven't hit rock bottom yet. I don't know if that's the right phrase, especially with I haven't noticed Eater Nashville. You don't do fluff pieces, but you also don't do clickbait takedowns, as opposed to some other publications like that's their bag.
Oh yeah.
So I was like a little taken back by finding out that there's some publications here that are strictly clickbait, and they're writing these like, I don't know, hit pieces, whatever, but controversial pieces for no reason other than trying to
clicks, yeah.
So
sure.
That's another layer to all this. So right now you're a journalist with integrity, journalistic standards, from what you've told me and from what I understand, and from your writing, you go way back to journalism school and this and that. So you have the influencers on TikTok, Instagram, getting paid to rep whatever. Then let's just say like they're not the ethical ones. They're just taking whatever money and they're saying, this is the best restaurant. Cracker Barrel is the best restaurant in Nashville. You should go there. Okay, that's not to pick on Cracker Barrel, but let's just use that as an example. Or Waffle House. So you have that layer of not even misinformation, just information out there of saying like, you have this piece of this influencers doing these pay for play. On top of that, you have to deal with clickbait magazines or articles, whatever, that are writing things just to get attention, and people are following that. How is Eater trying to do real journalism, real stories, real pieces? How do you manage to fight through all that or find a voice, or do you just stay in your lane and say, this is what we do and that's it? It's got to be on your mind to, not in a competition, but I would think that it would have to be in the forefront of Eater Nashville of like, we're getting crushed by X, Y, and Z because we're not doing these controversial pieces, or we're not taking money, Does it make sense, the question? Or
that does make sense.
Yeah.
So I find Eater is very interesting in that they try to be as impartial as possible.
Correct.
Like the true form of journalism, right? Like I'm presenting you with the situation and with the facts, and I'm letting you draw your own
mind.
opinions
Yes,
and
correct,
conclusions
right.
about this, but here are the facts and here's what I'm presenting to you. They have experimented with some more like voicier opinion type pieces. You'll see that in some of the cities. They've played around with it, but by and large, what Eater does is that very like pure like editorial journalism stance. Like, here are the facts. Here's the facts, ma'am. You're not going to see, like you said, a takedown of a restaurant. It's not going to happen. We don't do the fluff pieces either, and my editors are super strict about that. When I put pieces out there, and I may add an adjective in front of a dish, they're like, "No, strike that. Like, don't say that." Like, oh, okay. And I think that does differentiate it from what's out there. It is really like not trying to force an opinion down your throat. Like, if you just want to know what this is, Eater is not like the Fox News or the MSNBC.
Right,
like,
yeah,
it's not on either spectrum. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like, NPR maybe. I don't know. It's like, right.
It's good. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Associated Press, it's just, that's it. It's the Associated
Press, right. Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like, you want the straight up facts. You want to know what's going on. That's Eater. When you don't want the opinions like forced down your throat, that's Eater.
Yeah.
And I respect that for what it is. I've worked for publications where being voicey was the thing and very opinionated, and it's fun to write, I'll tell you that.
Right.
Like, the takedowns of being like sarcastic and cheeky, like it can be very fun to write in that voice. But in the end, I enjoy what Eaters do. It really is, because it's the pure form of like journalism. And I love that.
What is it, do you think, though, it's about like Yelp and, we have Talk as our reservation system, and it's an internal thing, but people leave us comments and reviews and stuff. Sometimes I go to restaurants, I don't have a fucking opinion. I was with friends, we were just there, we're enjoying each other's company, the food was good. I wasn't there like dissecting it. I really think like with Yelp, it really gave a platform to everybody to be a food critic. And unfortunately, you know, as a restaurant owner or a chef, you know, it's something you have to deal with of, you know, we're really putting ourselves out there where, you know, there could be 100 people could come in and we could get 100 reviews on Yelp the next day. I mean, everyone seems to have an opinion, and it really platformed people to. I'm trying to sort out what I'm trying to say. So, this is a great example of like inviting someone to a friends and family opening of a restaurant is the people coming feel they have to give you some sort of feedback. Mm-hmm. And that's not what a friends and family is about. A friends and family is to invite people in that are going to understand it's not going to be the best service. Right. You're going to wait a long time because we're trying to figure this system out. The food is going to be cold when it should be hot. It's going to take a really long time, and you're probably not going to have a good experience. That's why you invite your friends and your mom and your aunt to come for dinner.
Exactly.
What the friends and family has turned into is inviting people in that feel they need to give you their opinion at the end of it and tell you what was wrong, even if you didn't even ask. Oh. And it kind of platformed people, like I'm coming in for friends and family, and you know, you sort of want to ask, hey, was everything okay? Like, I know, listen, this was a terrible service. Listen, I put it out. I put out every single dish in this restaurant. Not my best work. I don't need you to tell me that it wasn't my best work. I know it. But sometimes, you know, you sort of need that. But I feel like Yelp really platformed the entire world to like have an opinion when sometimes you just don't have an opinion. And these reviews that people leave, they're comical, comical at best. There was one that Matthew, I don't read them. Matthew filters them. I don't even look. I'm not even allowed to look because it gets my blood boiling.
Yeah,
you know?
I can imagine.
But there's this one that he screenshot sent me, and all it said was, "No takeout, no delivery, 1 star."
Oh my god!
we were like,
well,
so Matthew replies and says, "Is this real?" That's all he replied with. And then he went and looked at the guy's profile, and he like reviewed a Publix, like a Publix grocery store, and saying like, you know, something about the aisle was there was, you know, a cardboard box in the aisle, and then he reviewed like a Bass Pro Shop, like the same. It's all these negative reviews.
Oh my god!
And we're just like, basically like, is this real? You know,
it's like a deeply unhappy person.
Right.
One. Like,
so it's kind of like that is like, there's a 1-star review on Iggy's because we don't do takeout. So it's kind of like
makes it meaningless.
There's no bar anymore. And I always said like what needs to happen, and I was saying it in Chicago because way back when Charlie Trotter had brought up an amazing point. Charlie Trotter was a 4-star restaurant in the Chicago Tribune. And when I was a young cook, there was only like 5 or 6  4-star restaurants, like the Ritz-Carlton, Charlie Trotter's, Everest, like all these like big dog names, you know. And then in 2005 and 6 and 7, there was this revolution that happened of these really young chefs that had worked for all these big restaurants, like opening their own places. Alinea came, Hamaro Cantu. I had a restaurant called Butter, Stephanie Izzard.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was just like this explosion of these young chefs. And what was great about Chicago is like all the old guard was like promoting them and helping them. And this is great for the city. It wasn't like, you know, in New York where Danielle Ballou and John George ran the show and they're just turning out all these restaurants. And it's so hard for like a young guy to do something. So Charlie Schwa got 4 stars in, you know, the restaurant Schwa in Chicago. Yeah, they got 4-star review in the Chicago Tribune. And they have it was BYOB. They have no tablecloths. They blast rap music. The chefs were like drunk all the time, or, you know, whatever. It was an insane dining experience just around, you know. And Charlie Trotter brought up an amazing point that sparked a debate of how can they be reviewed under the same criteria that we're being reviewed? We have serviceware. We have our servers. They didn't have any servers at SWA. Our servers wear suits. We have Riedel Crystal. We do a 10-course menu. We're getting the best ingredients. We're using proper steps of service. We're outsourcing all of this water. We're particular about the water that we get, the wine list, you know. And how can that be reviewed in the same criteria under the same circumstances at this restaurant? And he wasn't dogging schwa. He was dogging the system of how we do it. And I had always said, and a couple of chefs agreed with me, there needs to be like a ranking system. If you have a fried chicken restaurant, you're in the 1-star category, okay? You can't get 4 stars by having a fried chicken restaurant. You could be the best in your category. And if you want to jump up to 2 stars, you have to submit a formal review to say, listen, we've expanded our menu. We have steak, and now we have roasted chicken. We have actual silverware now. We have glassware. We have a wine program, and then like a bistro that's 2 stars that wants to bump up to 3 stars. The same kind of thing. We're not a casual bistro anymore. We have tablecloths. We have this types of service we're doing, and you can jump to the next category, and it could be reviewed by a panel. This is like really like out thinking, but that seemed to me like some sort of structure, and I feel there is no structure in anything anymore because everybody is a reviewer. Everybody's a critic. And what I want to ask you is, how hard does that make your job as like a real journalist, a real critic, of like putting in the hours and trying to make something, reasonable and authentic, but then also have a guy saying this restaurant's no good because they don't do delivery?
First of all, that drives me insane. That really drives me nuts. I mean, people that give like a 1-star review because they got to the restaurant and it was closed.
Right.
You've never even like stepped foot in there. Like it was literally closed, and they clearly advertised what their hours were, and you like messed up, but 1 star for them.
It's my fault.
So, yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. But to your question, I do have to make this distinction. So Eater is not in the business of reviewing.
Correct. And I know that, but this is just like a broad question of like, fair. Where are we at with this? Because there's nobody in Nashville that gives out stars.
Right.
Jim Myers was at the Tennessean, and I felt like he was like the authority. The Tennessean, when he was there, was, when I got here at least, like Jim wrote about it, was an authority. He did really pieces. He did great journalism like you're doing, and that was kind of it. But there were no stars given. There was no ranking system. There was no kind of like, I ate at this restaurant. It's brand new. Here's what I had that was good. Here's what I had that they need to work on. Here's the hours. 3 stars.
And that's what you get with papers of record, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
There is a structure, there is a formula, there's something that they abide by, there's a code that they abide by, and they're clear about it. They will outline their criteria and why, like certain things are the way they are. You obviously don't get that with something like a TikTok or a Yelp. There's no criteria. It's a wild, wild west. It's, it's the old saying, like, opinions are like assholes, right? Everybody has one. And any Joe Blow puts their opinion out there, and it's like, taken like seriously, or like weighted in a ranking in Yelp. Like, that's just like, it blows my mind. I don't even pay attention to that anymore, but sadly, I think people do.
People do. Yeah,
people
they do.
And I think that onus falls on the audience or the person who's reading. I mean, you have to, like, I hate this phrase so much, but seriously, like, do your homework. Like, if this restaurant has like 2 stars, like, I will read like some of the reviews and see like, well, why? Because I've heard differently. And sure enough, like 3/4 of those are like garbage, like comments that have nothing to do with the actual restaurant and the quality of the food. But I'm digging deeper. I'm taking the time to dig deeper and get informed as to why that's happening. A lot of people don't. They don't have the time. They don't want to dig deeper. They don't want to understand. Again, it's like news by headline. Like, I'm just seeing the big print,
correct.
and then that's what I feel now. That's what I'm going to talk about now,
Right.
and that's what I'm going to believe. I'm not going to go to that place,
Right.
because the headline said I shouldn't.
Right. But also with kind of what we touched on earlier was like influencer being paid. Everybody just read headlines in this exhausting world we live in of constantly being advertised to. Every time we wake up, open your phone, you're being marketed and advertised. And now you have, I'm going to go to Memphis and I want to see, what's a good restaurant. And I have all these paid ads from all these people saying, you got to go here, you got to go here, you got to go here. So even if and like I said, we're savvy people. This is our industry. We know what's good and what's not. But the everyday guy, family that works in an office that doesn't really know the food scene, it's hard to penetrate through all of that to get off of Broadway, to get into East Nashville, to find these little niche restaurants. Back to you is like, what can you do in your own bubble, in your own, atmosphere to kind of help change that? Or is it just an overly daunting process that even if you did make a little bit of change, it still wouldn't be enough to get to the masses?
So I try not to be like futile about it. Like my like little effort will do absolutely nothing. I think any little effort is worth is a little chip towards change, and you have to at least try. And so I'm always looking at the articles that I put out there through that lens specifically. Like, am I just telling the story of what marketing wants me to tell, or is this real? Am I digging a little bit past the deadline or the headline? Am I getting beyond that surface? Because again, I know several publications will write articles to press releases. They'll literally like regurgitate
just take the press release. I've seen it so many times, and I can read the article and being like,
that's a press release.
They didn't write this, a press release.
Absolutely. And that's sad because that's being taken for journalism. It's like article by press release.
So pause for 1 second. Hang on to that thought. Is it the laziness of the journalist? Or is it they just don't have any time because they're so overwhelmed with trying to put out an article every day about something? That's like there's a quagmire that you're in, and I see it. And now that I talk to you, we're uncovering more of the onion of you have a fucking hard job. It's
people, yes, and so I don't think it's laziness. I really think it's people don't have the time. You're being asked to do so much, and in such little time, it feels
such little pay.
It's not great pay.
Yeah.
But honestly, like I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I like truly love it. I would do this anyway, even if I weren't getting paid. I was doing it anyway. I was writing on Yelp and I was doing it anyway. I love it so much. On my downtime, I'm watching Chef's Table and reading Reddit threads about food. This is what I'm doing. I love it anyway. So the pay is almost negligible to me because it's something I would do. But getting back to your point, I think I try to do what I can to get past the PR machine and the press release. What are the other stories that I can tell? And that's digging, that's actually being like a journalist and going to different sources. So sometimes my sources will start with I will start with social media. I'll go to Facebook groups and what are certain Facebook groups saying. I kind of use them as my witnesses. Who's saying what? What are we talking about? What's the word on the street? They're my sources. So Reddit is great for that too. And we talked about that. I love going to Reddit, and that's a great start to something. Somebody will post something on Reddit. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'll dive deeper to that. So I'm trying to tell different stories and do actual investigative journalism work versus, whatever I'm being expected. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how I feel like I'm trying to affect some change. I'm listening to the people. I'm actually in there where people are talking amongst themselves. I'm like, okay, this is what people want to know. This is what they're talking about. This is of interest. This is what the locals are buzzing about. And I'm hoping that by telling those stories, I'm tapping into something deeper than that's what's the surface. So I'm hoping I'm affecting change in that kind of way.
Do you think Nashville would benefit from having an authority to say this is star reviews?
I think so.
I think so too.
I think so.
Why isn't anybody doing that?
That's a really good question.
Why it just seems like a no-brainer. In Chicago, there was the Phil Vitale, there was the guy at the Tribune. You could get a rating system from all these people, and it's you opened a restaurant, and you're like, okay, you have 4 months from the opening, 5 months, 6 months before you get reviewed. And they're going to come in 3 or 4 times.
Right.
This is not they come in the second day you're open and this place is shit, 1 star, And we would prepare for it. We had pictures of them, even though they were incognito. We had all these things. We had, constantly reinforcement in the pre-shift meetings about this to say that, really tighten up the food. And it just made the restaurant work harder, kind of knowing that monkey was on your back of this is kind of, and then after the reviews came out, if they were good, then it's this sigh of relief. And then, you could kind of like put it aside and start to enjoy what you're doing, you know, but you had to push for that first 6 months to get the reviews out of the way because you wanted them to be good, because those reviews held so much weight and authority that people were looking at that as the place to look and not TikTok. I think that there's just too much media right now.
I agree. You know, and I hadn't thought about it in that way, but like, who's the Pete Wells for Nashville? Like,
Nobody.
Right.
Not one person.
Right.
Nobody.
You're right.
I mean,
That's
there's
really
a
the point.
bunch of journalists doing cool things or talking about things. There's a bunch of influencers that you could get on their radar and they're going to, you know, make a reel about you. That's great. But there's nobody saying this is a 2-star restaurant. This bistro is an amazing restaurant and it deserves 2 stars or 3 stars. And there's nobody saying, you know, this fine dining restaurant deserves 4 stars and it is the crown jewel of dining in Nashville.
Yes.
And these restaurants, this is the pinnacle. If you want to come to Nashville and you want to have a fine dining experience, here are the 4-star restaurants. And underneath that is, if you don't want to spend that amount of money or have that type of service or have that type of long meal, here's the 3-star restaurants that are doing exceptional things. And then underneath that, you get into the casual places. Here's your 2-star restaurants. Here's your bistros. Here's your taquerias. And then you get to the 1-star, the meat and 3s that are exceptional. There's nothing.
That's a really good point.
You know?
It is missing that. You know, I had not thought about it in that respect, but you're right. Like, a lot of the major cities have that voice,
Right.
have that system.
And they come a bunch of times before they even write a piece, whether
Yes.
the influencer is going to come once when you first open and do the big blast of, hey, I'm at the brand new restaurant, their opening day, blah, blah, blah. And then they're on to the next thing. They're on to the next thing. And they're never going to circle back to that restaurant, only if something changed or they're being paid, or I don't know how their world works, or everybody's different. But it seems once they talk about it, they're not talking about it again because there's so many other things to talk about.
You know, and I'm wondering, like if they just don't, because a lot of it is they don't see value in paying somebody to have that position, because that's like a salaried, you know, somebody who is that kind of a reviewer. It's salaried. They're given a dining budget. There's a whole monetary thing around it, and I'm wondering if that value just isn't seen here in Nashville. Like, it's just not worth paying somebody to be that person, to do that thing.
Yeah, I don't know the
Nashville.
budget of these papers or magazines and stuff, but
Sometimes it boils down to just that. It's,
you know,
like,
it seems like Nashville Scene, some of those people at Nashville Scene could easily fill those shoes because
I think so.
They are like seasoned journalists that like have discerning palates. I think you could fill that void because this is what you do. You know, this is not, you know, I'm an influencer and, you know, if you want me to talk about food, I'll talk about food. If you want me to talk about gym shoes, I'll talk about gym shoes. Whoever's paying me is what I'm going to talk about. And that's this quagmire that I keep like waking up to of like,
who's the source?
Who's the source? Who's the authority? Who's not even authority, but who are the Nashville restaurants looking to say, you know, this is worth it or it's not, you know?
On the closest we come to it is when James Beard Times comes around, and then we have like a national, you know, foundation that actually comes in and says, this is we have criteria, and you fall under this criteria, and you know, semi-finalist, finalist. That, I mean, that's the closest we.
But that's
come.
like such a political. I mean, that's like an extremely political thing, and it's always
is.
been an extremely political thing. It just that's a national.
It is national
world thing. Okay. They're not coming. I don't even know how James Beard works, but they're not here every day, every week.
No.
Coming into this place. There's no one from the James Beard flying into Nashville and eating at these restaurants and then going back and being like, okay, yes, this place was great. I almost think it has nothing to do with the food at all.
Ooh,
I don't know
I
don't know their criteria, but it's kind of like I don't understand how it works. And you know, even when I was in Chicago, I never really understood it. It's almost like the presidency, like when it's your time, it's your time. You know, that's it. It's Hillary's time and she's running and she's going to get a nomination. Like that's, you know, so, and I almost feel like everything is so watered down that these awards, they don't really hold much weight anymore.
Do you really feel that about James Beard? Like a Michelin? Like,
I don't know. Like Michelin in Atlanta was an extremely interesting thing to me. And World's 50 Best is an extremely interesting thing to me.
now why?
Because a country can go to the world's 50 best and say, we want you to come here. And they're going to take money. This is from what I hear and from what I understand. I'm not married to these opinions. This is from the opinions that I hear from people that are voters, from people that are in these countries. This is how I understand that it works. And if it doesn't work like this, I would like to have somebody explain to me how it works. But the way that I understand how 50, we'll talk about 50's best first, is the country says, we want you to come. They come, they do a huge award ceremony, and they give all of these awards out to everybody. And that's how it works. Like, if it's the world's 50 best, why isn't it the world? It's like saying the NBA, you win the world title in the NBA or the NFL, you're world champions. Well, we're the only one that play football. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we're not in, like, Mexico is not in the NFL.
No.
So how could it be a world championship and that's how I feel like the world's 50 best. It's not the world. Like, there's no Nashville restaurants on the world's 50 best list. There's a couple American restaurants, but there's no American world's 50 best. There's one in Asia. There's one in South America. And Michelin is another interesting thing. It's because Michelin came to the United States. What was this, back in early 2000s, mid 2000s, 2010? And they did New York. Mm-hmm. They did Los Angeles, they did Vegas, and they did Northern California. And I think they did LA at that time too.
They did LA as well.
Yeah. Yep. Why did they go to those places? New York is New York. You have all those French chefs. There's a lot of 3-star Michelin restaurants there. Why did they go to Vegas? Because Vegas paid because you had Guy Savoy, you had Joe Robuchon, you had Wolfgang Puck. You had the most amazing chefs in the world had restaurants there. There's 3-star Michelin restaurants there to give stars away to.
Yes.
And then why did you go to California? You have Thomas Keller is there. You have LA. You have these restaurants. But from what I understand now is the city pays for Michelin to get in there. It's like Atlanta has an amazing food scene, but I couldn't name a Michelin star. When that list came out, I was like, holy shit. Like, really? Like, okay. Like, some of the ones you're like, okay, I knew this place. And some of the other ones, some of those restaurants I never even heard of before. So, I mean, props to Atlanta. Like, now Atlanta's on my list to go and check it out. Like, I'm like exactly what Michelin wants. Like, I read the list. I'm like, I gotta get to Atlanta right now. I gotta get some of these places. But, their business is selling magazines. Their business is not giving awards away.
Right.
The awards are a byproduct of selling a magazine. Like I said, these are my views from what I understand. And if somebody wants to say that is not how it works, I understand Michelin is this ambiguous thing that nobody knows how it works. Even the people that are voters and like are reviewers, they don't even know how it works. So what criteria are we working off of? Take some of those restaurants in Atlanta, and very well deserved to all of them, but put them up with the 3-star Michelin restaurants in New York. I think San Francisco is the hardest place to get a Michelin star for whatever reason. So they're not the same reviewers. We're not on the same playing field as San Francisco, Chicago, New York, LA, Atlanta. It's not the same playing field. So what is the criteria? What I want is an even playing field for everybody to have a seat at the table to say, if I want to have a 3-star Michelin restaurant, this is the criteria that I know. And if I only get 2, I know we need to work a little bit harder. To have a noodle shop in Hong Kong get a Michelin star where they don't even have like seats is like, what is that criteria?
Right.
How is that fair? Back to the Charlie Trotter argument of how is that fair that we put all this attention to detail in our steps of service and the flatware we have and the wine glasses we pick specifically for this grape varietal to go against a restaurant that doesn't even have alcohol.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any alcohol at all. So,
he's not wrong. It's a really valid point.
Right.
It's a really valid point. So then who creates this criteria? Who puts it out there?
Right. Back to your point is there's not enough money to have people on a payroll at a dying magazine and a dying paper in a world where nobody reads the fucking paper anymore.
Exactly.
And it's just easy to pay an influencer to come in to get likes, to get more Instagram followers. Like,
that's where the eyeballs are, right?
it's sad, and I feel the more I talk and the more I hear myself talk, I feel like I'm some dinosaur, some relic of the past that's hanging on to, journalists holding themselves accountable and having integrity and not taking free stuff and not taking money and actually giving an honest opinion. Where if Pete Wells or Phil Vitale said, Ryan, these are the problems that I had with your restaurant. I'm going to speak candidly, it was under seasoned. It's like I could go back and say, okay, we really need to work on this.
Right.
Well, I could drop a bag of money at the feet of some influencer, and they're going to, oh, this is the best restaurant I've ever been to in my life, blah, blah, blah. You got to come, so.
I mean, their reputation is staked on that. Like,
it's staked
somebody
on
like Pete Wells, that his reputation is staked on doing exactly what Pete Wells does. Mm-hmm. And he gets paid to do what Pete Wells does.
Right.
But going back to our point, a dying paper just doesn't have that budget to pay a full-time food reviewer and have a dining budget and stipend.
Correct.
to make sure it's really purely judgment free. It's not being paid for play. It's the newspaper paying for the dining budget. It's not the restaurant putting up somebody for a free meal. It's truly unbiased.
Right.
That money just isn't there. And again, that goes back to where are the eyeballs? Well, it's not on the papers anymore. It's on TikTok.
Well, the city of Atlanta can't pay Michelin to come in and rate them, and then they come in and be like, "Yeah, no stars. Sorry." It's like, I don't know how that works. I don't understand it, but from what I understand is I remember in Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, the mayor, brought Michelin here, and it was a big deal, and he fought to get them to come to Chicago.
Well, because that's a huge,
it's a huge market.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of amazing chefs there, and Atlanta has all kinds of amazing chefs. But is that the same playing field? And why doesn't Michelin just rate the whole country? Because I don't know why. Why would you go to Vegas and not go to Chicago back in the mid 2000s? I don't understand it, and maybe it's not for me to understand, but
I think it goes back to the money trail, where who's got the money,
right? And not saying there's anything wrong with it. I get it. They're trying to sell a magazine. They're trying to sell a nonprofit award system. They're trying to whatever it is, the world's 50 best. I don't. They're selling Pellegrino water. I'm not sure. They're trying to sell sparkling water, but it's kind of this ambiguous thing that we just sort of agreed with, and then it's kind of surprising that this restaurant is being awarded something for whatever reason. And I don't know. We all work really hard.
Yes, you do.
All of us.
Yes, you do.
So why can't it just be an even playing field?
It's a boon for the city that gets the Michelin. It's a big boost for those restaurants. I mean, again, there's so many little factors into what plays into that. In an ideal world, yes, we would all have our Pete Wells and have that criteria and that standard. But unless like you're playing in a major city like New York, I don't know that Nashville will ever have that. I just don't think people see value in that. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to pay for it.
Right.
It just won't happen. And that sucks. I remember in Miami growing up, I would look forward. We had an alt weekly called the Miami New Times, like the Nashville scene. And there was a food reviewer in there. His name was Lee Klein. And he like set the standard for Miami. Like this is like going back into like the 90s and early 2000s, like pre-internet, whatever. And I remember every week I would look forward to reading what restaurant he was like reviewing that week. And he would like, give it the stars, and he had his criteria. And it was something that I looked forward to every single week. And I would just devour what Lee Klein said. And like years later, like I met Lee Klein, like at a media event. I'm like, you're like, I had a fangirl moment. Like, you're Lee Klein.
That's great.
Like I've been reading your reviews for like decades. Like, oh, and I was like so taken aback. And now it's like, where is Lee Klein? Like, those reviews are not in the New Times anymore. And now it's like gone. And I don't know what's happened to those days. And obviously
I think
money.
Zagat did a really good job, and I couldn't tell you last time I saw a Zagat guy. Are they even still in business? Do they even still do it?
No, Zagat was bought out by Google. So it became like a branch of Google. And then I think got spun off into something else. But yeah, I think that was another one in New York where New Yorkers and New York restaurants
lived and died by the Zagat Guide. And it wasn't, it was these mom and pop restaurants that didn't have money for PR, didn't have like some flashy chef. And I remember when the Zagat Guide would come out, they would all be like looking at it, and like that was a guide that you went to because it covered every single restaurant in New York. And I think like if these reviewers and these awards or these, conglomerate things want to do it, you got to bring everybody in under the pretenses of everybody knows the rules. So this is not this ambiguous thing of, could a taco truck get a 3-star Michelin, According to the Michelin rules that I understand, like a gas station rest stop could get 3-star Michelin because they're only ranking the food and how it tastes and this and that. Like that's how my impression of what Michelin has always been.
Now, I do think they've got like some criteria as far as like budget. Like they've got the Bib Gourmand, which is,
which is great. Yeah.
So they do like some differentiation in there, but yeah, it's not.
What are you excited about in Nashville right now?
Ooh, what am I excited about? In terms of like new restaurants opening or just like general like?
Just both.
Both. What am I excited about? I really am excited the influx of new restaurants that I see like on the cusp that are coming in. That just is what gets me going. That's why I do what I do. I'm like, oh, this cool new concept is coming in. A lot of new stuff is being built up like around like the Nashville yards, and I'm curious to see like how they'll fare. A lot of people from out of town are coming in. So I'm excited to see that and how they'll play here. I love a good new concept. So looking at that, generally, I'm watching to see how Nashville evolves in terms of all of these new people that are moving here. I feel like the locals aren't very pleased with the influx of people. I'm, again.
My Uber driver reminds me every time I take an Uber home, everyone always says, "Oh yeah, you could never come to this neighborhood 10 years ago." I'm like, well, those days are gone, man.
That's what it is.
Sorry.
There's of course, and it happens like in any like major city. You have the people that've been there forever. They're like, whine and complain and like, I like the way it used to be. But if the city is doing it right, they're going to grow and evolve.
Correct.
And you got to go with it.
It's life, man.
It is life. So either you go with it or you move away and you find another like city or state to do what you want to do. But I think that watching like those two factions, I'm excited to see when they can like come to an understanding, and like I can see like the new and the old like make something really cool together. Like the example I gave with Julio, like I love that. And I remember sitting in that dining room and like hearing people like talk when Julio was putting out these dishes, and he was using these very traditional like Mexican ingredients and putting in these very traditional Southern dishes. And like people were like digging it. Like they loved it and they were just raving about it. And a lot of them were like native like Nashvillians. I got into conversation with a couple of them, and that really made me happy, made my heart smile. I'm like, that's so cool. Like you get it. Like yes, you were born and raised here, but you're excited about what's happening and you welcome it, and you're excited for what's new, what's coming up. I love to see that.
Right.
And so I'm excited to see more of that.
Excellent.
Also, like we need some more like Latin places. Like please, like
a Peruvian restaurant.
Oh my god, yes,
Please.
that is like all over the place in Miami.
Please,
like, where
man.
is there? Okay,
Where's the leche de tigre?
Yes, I did hear, and I have not been, but I heard there was a great Peruvian place in Plaza de Mariachi.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard it's like a slamming Peruvian place. I got to go like just like suss that out and see what's going on there, because where's like my huancaína? Like I want my papa la huancaína.
Yeah, I know.
Leche de tigre, yeah. So yeah, I'm missing that. There's like one Cuban place, Soy Cubano.
Oh, Soy Cubano.
In the Wash,
yeah.
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 Missing my Cuban food.
Yeah.
I just. Oh.
What? Okay, so here's be the final question, and we'll wrap this up. What are a couple things that you miss about Miami?
Okay.
And what are a couple things that you like about Nashville that isn't Miami?
Ooh, okay. A couple things that I miss from Miami. I think number one is the easy access to the Latin food. I mean,
to everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, and it's just, how like the way Mexican here, or people just think like Mexican is it. It's not it. I mean, it's great, but there's so much more. Like, where's a Puerto Rican, Colombian, Venezuelan, Guatemalan, Brazilian, Peruvian, like all of that.
Well, there's the different regions of Mexico too. Like you were saying,
yes.
Mexican food, you're like, it's a blanket statement.
Yes,
like what are we talking about? Oaxaca? Are we talking about Central?
Right.
Are we talking Mexico City? Like what are we talking about? The border?
Yes.
What are we talking about? You know, the Baja?
So I miss that in Miami. That's just like in every corner, you're like falling into like some like bakeries selling amazing like Latin pastries and stuff. I mean, I miss that tremendously. I do miss. I think I this is gonna be weird to say because it's like a love-hate, but I miss the like flamboyance of Miami in a way that like Nashville's flamboyant in a different way, but Miami is just like, it's so like in your face and like out there.
Oh,
like,
there's a purple Lamborghini just driving down the street.
Yes, exactly. Like, you know, people like wearing like the wildest like things or not wearing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's just it's so like unabashedly loud in who it is. I would go to like, obviously I had like Miami like wardrobe, and I would wear some of like Miami things in like Nashville, and like right away people are like I get stared at because it's just so different from what they wear here. It's like what? So I do miss that. I miss like that in your face kind of flamboyance that Miami has, and of course like my family. I miss them tremendously. They're all still down there. That should go without saying though. So things I like about Nashville that I don't get in Miami. So
Hot chicken.
You know, I don't know. Okay, hot chicken. It's like everybody that comes to town, like, we get some hot chicken. Like, yeah, we'll get you some hot chicken. Yeah. Got it. There is a general like kindness here, I think, in people that I don't. It's hard to get in Miami. There's a coldness in Miami. Like everybody thinks like if you. I would never say hi to a stranger in Miami. Like I just don't walk down the street like, hey, hi, or hi to my neighbor. You don't do that, because if somebody does that, you automatically assume like they're going to scam you out of something. Like, why are you saying hi to me?
Yes.
Do you know me? You don't know me. You want something from me. What's your deal?
Yeah.
That's not the case. Like you like genuinely like will say hi to people. Like when you're walking, like, hey, good afternoon, or hi. And it's like, it's normal. Like that's nice. Like people are like nice. And I don't necessarily mean like, this is something else I found. It's hard to like break through like the Nashville, like to get to like truly like the Nashville groups and like get yourself like in to the Nashville peeps. They're very surface, like nice. There's like they're very genial like here. And I do like that. That's nice. But it is hard to like break in and be like accepted into like some of the Nashville groups, I think. But I do love how nice everybody is here. That's cool. I love that I can get like a really good like biscuit here, like really damn good, like a damn good biscuit, like and access to like barbecue. Like mine, there's none of that. I mean, hop over to Memphis, and that's not so much Nashville, but hop over to Memphis, and although we have Central Barbecue here now,
Central Barbecue is great.
Yes.
Wow.
But the fact that I have access like to that is really cool. So I do respect a lot of like the food that happens like here, like indigenously, and just is natural to like Nashville in the South. That doesn't happen in Miami, and so that's really cool. So I really like those things about Nashville. And I like that it still feels, even though it's changing, small town. Like it's a big city, but a small town. Like it mixes both. It's changing, but I love the dichotomy of the both. Like it's a small town and big city britches. And
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I think we'll end it on that. Thanks for sitting down with us. It was absolutely amazing talking to you. I think you have some really great views on journalism and food, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ryan. This is a blast.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.